Well, hello everybody and welcome. Hopefully you had a great weekend. It was super nice yesterday. Thank goodness. While we wait for people to come in and get their notifications that we are on live, I will just move to do a few things here and actually do a little bit of housekeeping so that everybody is aware of what the Canadian People's Union is, and especially that other countries can do the exact same as what we are doing, and that could really change humanity forever and stop the oligarchs from trying to implement their corporate global governance over all the peoples on this planet. So, anyways, stay tuned. Don't go away and get comfy.
Attention,
And I'll be
Canadians.
right back.
Do you feel disconnected from our current political system? This could be our last chance to take a real legal stand for our rights. It's time to shift the political power to its right. It's time to shift the political power to its rightful owners, the Canadian citizens and Indigenous peoples of Canada. Dive into our history, understand the need for change, and embark on the quest for true democracy. Are you concerned about our nation's commitment to human rights and self-governance? The power shift to freedom aligns with vital treaties and international laws enabling us to claim our rightful place as collective head of state. We advocate legally replacing the Crown, King Charles III, and our partocracy system with a true democracy, the peoples as the true, collective head of state with veto power over our governance, to ensure your voice counts more than party interests. When our national collective civil and political rights are respected, your influence on policies will be direct and impactful. Join us on this noble struggle to make every Canadian and Indigenous peoples a meaningful participant in our future as collective head of state, which was legally owed and kept from us since the patriation of our Constitution, an official decolonization from the United Kingdom of 1982. It's time to correct the past of our government's lies and omissions to the people of our great country before it is too late. People 15 years old and over can sign our Canadian People's Referendum at canadianreferendum.ca and unite for our rights as the collective head of state in our Constitution. Together, we can be the example in reshaping Canada's future, not just for us, but for all peoples worldwide, once and for all. Are you ready to be part of this transformative movement? Join the Power Shift to Freedom movement by the Canadian People's Union and be part of a bold vision for Canada's future. Visit thecpu.ca for more details. Embrace and face the change required on your part to shape our future.
Okay, and we're back. So, anyway, I want to come on, and what I did is I put together a whole series of little videos together so that Canadians can feel better about the Trump tariffs. So, it's never good to know that prices will be going up, but the thing is we don't need to take on any American products if we don't want to. Okay, so that tariff will not be seen there. So there's a lot of things that could be happening, and it's going to be very important to see what happens Tuesday. So in regards to what the tariffs and everything else, we're pretty safe here in Canada. They're making it sound like more dreary than what it actually should be. And I forgot to fix my camera so that The Zoom doesn't come in and out. So I'll fix that later. But anyways, you're going to see some videos. And then you're also going to understand why there was only a 10% tariff on oil. You'll find out exactly why the United States can't use its own oil. Okay. And it's really interesting. And then you'll see that even though at the tour, the last video is about, you'll be able to see how France is still negotiating with Russia for oil. Okay. And so even though they were kind of helping, the war in the Ukraine with certain things, business is business. And corporations, they'll sell their products even if they have to move countries. And most of them already have, they're already set up in each of our countries. So are we worried about not getting something from the United States? I wouldn't be. If you know exactly what that is, the kinds of goods that we get from the United States and all that, well, you wouldn't be too worried either. The only problem is that we need to watch, make sure that our government at least imposes a freeze on prices so that we're not being charged by the private corporations, the grocery stores, and everybody else in regards to our groceries and food and whatnot, to say, even though we're buying Canadian or from another country, because we do buy from every other country, not so much the United States, we need to make sure that the corporations don't inflate the price anyway, even though it doesn't cost them anymore. And they shouldn't have charged us anymore. So right now I'm going to show you something that's been happening in the United States and why they're so freaked out, okay? So you'll get an idea. But really, when you look at Canada and Mexico being attacked by the United States, and I have to say that, the criminal presidential toddler across the border has a lot of balls, because you start threatening Canada, Greenland, Panama, Mexico, and then everybody else, and the BRICS on top of that today. Oh my God, I couldn't believe it. And the BRICS answered, oh, we're not planning on changing the United States money. The United States will still be able to use their own money, but doesn't mean that another one can't come out. Okay. So anyways, with the BRICS nations, they keep expanding. But at the same time, if we're threatened, what stops Russia from, first of all, NORAD is in Canada. All of the military bases and everything in the Arctic, we could throw them out. And Greenland already has a U.S. military base there. And why is the United States in a panic over Greenland? Has nothing to do with security. Nothing. Everything has to do with business and making the corporations richer. Okay? The corporations richer at the cost of the United States citizens more than Canadians and Mexicans. Okay? Because if you look at Mexico, and they're starting to deal with China, they deal with China on trade in every other country. But the toddler across the border here thinks that we only deal with the United States. Well, he's got something. Obviously, he doesn't know we deal with every other country. Anyways, and we can still get our fruits and vegetables from Mexico. There's oranges everywhere. So why are we in a panic? No, they should be in a panic, because by attacking us and retaliating with the same tariffs, their people are going to pay through the nose. So they won't be able to get any stuff from us, stuff from Mexico, and the other countries as well. Okay, unless they pay through the nose. So what kind of stuff can they get from their own country to keep going? Because the reason why the United States is in deep debt is because the corporations outsourced everything to other countries so that they could pocket more money and become more wealthy. So the jobs and everything went out the door in the United States. And then, did you know that the United States, every citizen, they have over 350 million people responsible for a national debt at $107,000 each? I think we're between 30 or 40,000, maybe closer to 45 since COVID. But I haven't looked at those figures yet. That's going to be another show where I'm going to show you that, okay? Where the United States owes that $107,000 per citizen. For the debt. So does Trump ever talk about the debt? Now he's talking about stopping income tax. Well, the only thing that he can do there is he's going to be bringing in everything that the WEF wanted to bring in. Okay? So keep your eyes peeled, listen, and we're going to be giving more information to our members on Tuesday at the Tuesday meeting. So our members who are listening, please do not meet. I'm going to have a special meeting on Tuesday to go through this, because then Tuesday we're going to see exactly what's going to be going on. If seriously, when there's a bully in the house, you got to call its bluff. And if I were on the switch on Tuesday morning, everybody would have to stay home on Tuesday in the States because I turn off the switch. You want to be a bully? You can play at that game. Okay, so now please listen to this. So anyways, I could be just as mean. So that's a joke, people. I will be right back, and we're going to show you this here. Oops, okay. I'm going to kind of take myself out of the picture here. Okay, so you can see more, especially with the translations for the French people. Okay, and here we go.
Given Trump's unilateral decision to plunge the US into a trade war with our biggest trading partners, it looks like the people who are going to be most hurt by this move are Trump's own supporters. And that's because even before Trump took office, the Canadians were already formulating a plan to impose maximum pressure on Trump by targeting the retaliatory tariffs on red states. According to the New York Times, the Canadian officials said their choice of goods was meant to be precisely targeted and aimed at political impact. They specifically want to focus on goods made in Republican or swing states where the pain of tariffs, like pressure on jobs and the bottom line of local businesses, would affect Trump allies. Canada's government hopes that those allies, including governors or members of Congress, would then pick up the phone and call Mr. Trump, intervening in favor of de-escalation. Melanie Joy, Canada's foreign minister, met with a slew of Republicans to make her country's case, including Senator Lindsey Graham of South Carolina, Senator Jim Risch of Idaho, and the Senate Majority Leader John Thune of South Dakota. Ms. Jolly said that she hoped her outreach to senior Republicans would persuade them to intervene to avert or limit a trade war and its negative impact on consumers and jobs on both sides of the border. Quote, "My job here is to be able to talk about facts, and that comes before any threat of counter tariffs from our side. Because then the senators might say, well, why are we doing this? Why are we imposing tariffs? It's affecting my own constituency." Now, first off, it's sweet that Canada's foreign minister thinks that these Republican senators are putting their constituents' needs above the needs of Donald Trump. In case anybody is new here, the reason that these Republican senators will not respond to things that impact their own constituency is because they are not in government to represent their constituents. They are there to represent Donald Trump. The legislative branch has contracted every ounce of its autonomy and integrity and dignity to Trump. They will confirm his aggressively unqualified nominees, even if it means their own kids will grow up in a country whose healthcare is overseen by a vaccine skeptic. Even if it means their own kids will grow up in a country where the president uses the FBI as his own tool of retribution. Even if it means their own kids will grow up in a country where our top agencies are led by reality TV stars. There is no limit to what they will sacrifice in deference to Trump. So the notion that these guys are going to be moved by the prospect of their constituents getting hurt, it's cute, but probably not going to move the needle. And in fact, Canada has already begun doing what it promised. British Columbia has announced that it will no longer buy American liquor from red states in response to U.S. tariffs. As a first step in response to the tariffs, British Columbia's premier announced immediate measures, including directing the BC Liquor Distribution Branch to immediately stop buying American liquor from red states and remove top-selling red state brands from the shelves of public liquor stores. and directed the BC government and Crown operations to buy Canadian goods and services first. In other words, they are making it abundantly clear that they understand how political pressure works in the United States, and that they understand that half of the US is as opposed to Trump as they are.
Yeah, and I'm just like, okay, so how does a 61-year-old guy run circles around guys like me in their mid-30s? Well, he's definitely not cheating with dangerous injections or pills. So what's his secret? I did some research and found out some scary stuff about the 5 feminizing foods he's always talking about. Turns out he's actually onto something. He says he's on a mission from God to stop what he calls America's soft man epidemic caused by these 5 feminizing foods. He's a Christian too, so it's not...
If they want to ensure that Trump feels maximum political pressure, this is how to do it. Beyond that, Mexico's Claudia Sheinbaum made it clear that the country that will be most impacted from these tariffs is, in fact, the United States.
Y tenemos plan A, plan B, plan C para lo que decida el gobierno de los Estados Unidos. Ahora es muy importante que sepa el pueblo de México que siempre vamos a defender la dignidad de nuestro pueblo, que siempre vamos a defender el respeto a nuestra soberanía y un diálogo como iguales, como siempre lo hemos mencionado, sin subordinación. Vamos a esperar, como siempre he dicho, con la cabeza fría, tomando las decisiones, estamos preparados y mantenemos este diálogo. El día de hoy está aquí el secretario de Economía, porque es importante recordar las implicaciones que pudiera tener poner aranceles para la economía de los Estados Unidos, principalmente, para el tratado comercial de los 3 países, para los 3 países, para nuestros pueblos, pero en particular para la economía de los Estados Unidos.
And of course, after this statement, it was confirmed that she ordered retaliatory tariffs against products from the US. And as far as our neighbor to the north is concerned, Canada's Justin Trudeau took to Twitter writing, "The United States has confirmed that it intends to impose 25% tariffs on most Canadian goods with 10% tariffs on energy. I've met with premiers and our cabinet today, and I'll be speaking with the President Sheinbaum of Mexico shortly." He then had this to say publicly.
Beyond that, it will have real consequences for you, the American people. As I have consistently said, tariffs against Canada will put your jobs at risk, potentially shutting down American auto assembly plants and other manufacturing facilities. They will raise costs for you, including food at the grocery stores and gas at the pump. They will impede your access to an affordable supply of vital goods crucial for U.S. security, such as nickel, potash, uranium, steel, and aluminum. They will violate the free trade agreement that the President and I, along with our Mexican partner, negotiated and signed a few years ago. But it doesn't have to be this way. As President John F. Kennedy said many years ago, geography has made us neighbors, history has made us friends, economics has made us partners, and necessity has made us allies.
And of course, the reality is that our own government would be well served to listen, because at the end of the day, it is Americans who will be impacted, and red states specifically. I repeat this point in every video, and I'll continue to repeat it now. Tariffs are a tax on Americans. When we impose tariffs on a foreign country, it is the importing American company that pays. And they're not going to just absorb those increased costs, so instead they pass those costs on to the consumer. That's us. We are the consumer. That means that a tariff on Mexico or Canada or China is in actuality a tax on Americans. Here's an example of what I mean. According to the New York Times, the executive chairwoman of the Canadian auto parts maker Linamar said that the 25% tariffs President Trump intends to impose tomorrow on exports from Canada and Mexico could shut down North American auto production within a week. Quote, "Nobody can absorb this kind of cost, not the automakers, not the suppliers, not consumers. Demand will collapse and vehicle production will grind to a halt, putting millions of workers out of work, the vast majority of which are in the United States." And of course, That's just the tip of the iceberg. Look at the top US imports from Canada: crude oil, vehicles, machinery, plastics, wood, iron, steel. We also import breads, meats, gold. That means gas prices, energy prices, food prices, car prices, and jewelry prices are all going to rise. From Mexico, we import vehicles, parts, computers, crude oil, fruits, vegetables. That means gas prices, energy prices, computers, electronics, and food prices are going to rise. From China, we import phones, laptops, tablets, toys, games, clothing, shoes, furniture, bedding, batteries. That means prices on nearly every good we buy, from gas to energy to construction to clothing to food to jewelry to cars, is going to go up. Not because it's some necessary evil, it's not, but rather because Trump wants to try and prove his dominance. And because he's threatened it, now he won't back down, because he doesn't want to be viewed as capitulating. This is what you get when you elect a guy whose entire life is him compensating for a fragile ego. In fact, take a look at this. The White House lowered the tariffs on energy to minimize the rise in costs from 25% to 10%. That's on Canadian energy. That is a tacit admission that they understand tariffs raise prices. Otherwise, why lower the tariff? And if you are going to lower the tariff to minimize the rise in costs for Americans, then why impose them at all if you understand that tariffs mean higher costs for us? They don't even get to claim ignorance here, because they're proving that they understand this will cause harm, and yet they're opting to barrel ahead anyway. So look, while it's clear that Republican elected officials will never put their own constituents above dear leader Donald Trump, perhaps Trump's own voters will recognize reality when his trade war disproportionately impacts them. Trump may feel immune to political pressure from the left, but when his own voters are dealt the most intense blow, something tells me it won't be as easy for him to ignore them. Before you go, just a quick note, if you'd like to see
Okay, and I'm back. So anyways, that's from the States. And, all of those products, and that's why I want to show you that. All of those products are really important because what I was saying earlier, Trump goes and attacks Canada. He attacks Mexico, and then all of the other countries. Well, Panama. So most of you might not know that China, Panama, and all of them are, some of them are all with the BRICS now. And the BRICS is backed by China and Russia. So Mexico is trading now again with China and doing some deals there. Cuba just joined the BRICS. So China can have access to Cuba and whatnot. So then you'd have Mexico being protected by China. And then we could have Russia protect us in the Arctic. Who knows what's going to happen. But a lot of things could be thrown out in the air. And the United States would be stuck in the middle with no allies. Okay, no allies. Because what's happening in Europe, now he's accosting the European sector. And like I said earlier, France is still buying its oil from Russia. So business is business, war is war, and business is business. So they still do business together, even though, there's funny things going around. So now I'll get to the next video. We're going to share a screen again. And please listen very, very intently because, I just want to answer something. No, we're not even close to getting the numbers of our referendum. We only have about not even 1,300 people signing it. And then with the Convention of Consent, it still doesn't give us enough. So the Canadian citizens will have to really pick it up and try and get all of their family members and everybody to sign. That's in the hands of the people. And a while ago, somebody mentioned something about Carney is predicted to declare a national emergency, putting elections off another year. Most people, I'm really surprised that most people don't know. Mark Carney will not become the prime minister in March. Okay. Like when we go back, when the parliament opens up, it's still Justin Trudeau. The only thing that they're doing is he's going to be retiring And once an election is called, then it's going to be, if Carney wins, then Carney will have to go and win his seat, and the Liberals will have to win the election. I'm shocked you guys don't even know. The minute that the prime minister steps down, the whole party goes. Okay, that's how it works. They can't change prime ministers in between. Okay, if they do that, then they're going against the Constitution, and that would in fact be criminal in the end. Okay, so because that would be a coup, and that would be seen as they'd be seen as a traitor. Okay, so that can't happen. Okay, so Carney is not going to be the prime minister once everybody goes back to Parliament. That's still Justin Trudeau. He just said he was resigning. He didn't say when. Okay, so I just want to clear that up, because I see a lot of confused people. It's a shame that Canadians don't know more about our system than that, especially when I've given you the information in our presentations. So anyways, I'm going to go here and screen share. Hang on here. Okay, I have to keep going back and forth. Okay, Canada, US oil. Share. There we go. Make this bigger and make sure I've got the translation. Yes, I do.
Welcome to your ultimate pit stop, Piston Pundit. Today, we delve into a high-stakes international energy drama that goes beyond the automotive world. In this video, we'll explore how Canada's bold threat to cut off crucial electricity exports could reshape the U.S. energy market and global trade ties. We'll examine ripple effects in oil exports, tariff battles, and political power plays, uncovering the deep interconnections in our economies. Stay tuned as we break down every facet of this dramatic showdown. Number 7. The shockwave, Canada's bold electricity cut threat. In a stunning move, Canadian leaders have warned they may sharply reduce or suspend electricity exports to key U.S. states. States such as New York, Michigan, and Minnesota depend on nearly 95% of their power imports from Ontario. Such a cut could trigger soaring energy bills, grid instability, and even localized blackouts during peak periods. Analysts stress that this threat is not merely symbolic, but a strategic counter to U.S. tariffs, leveraging energy as a bargaining chip. The move highlights the vulnerabilities inherent in an interdependent energy network, with potential ripple effects across manufacturing, technology, and other sectors. As U.S. policymakers scramble for alternative solutions, this dramatic tactic may force a reassessment of energy policies and redefine trade negotiations between the two nations. This bold strategy could reshape North America. Number 6. Crude control, oil as a political lever. While electricity headlines steal the spotlight, Canadian oil exports are a crucial gear in the energy engine. The U.S. relies heavily on Canadian crude, with pipelines like Keystone XL and Enbridge forming the backbone of its supply. Recently, about 6.1 million barrels per day have been imported, with roughly 67% coming from Canada. Amid rising U.S. tariffs, Canadian leaders are hinting at a potential oil export cut, a move that could send oil prices surging. Even a temporary disruption might force industries to seek pricier alternatives, impacting everything from commuter fuel costs to industrial operations. This tit-for-tat maneuver not only underscores the interdependency of North American energy, but also highlights how a slight hiccup in oil exports can reverberate through global markets and long-term policy strategies. Number 5. Tariff turbulence, North American trade clashes. The escalating trade war between the U.S. and Canada has become a battleground of tariffs, trade restrictions, and retaliatory moves. Fueled by America First policies favoring domestic production, the U.S. has imposed sweeping tariffs on goods like steel, aluminum, and consumer products. In response, Canada, vital for energy, raw materials, and technology, has countered with proposals that may include restrictions on oil, electricity, and rare earth metals. These measures have created ripple effects across various sectors, raising prices, disrupting supply chains, and impacting energy security and automotive manufacturing. Market volatility and debates over economic sovereignty underscore the stakes. Amid this tension, one must ask, can North America balance protectionism with global interdependence for a sustainable trade equilibrium? Before we delve deeper, do us a favor and smash that like and subscribe button. This helps us reach more auto enthusiasts just like you. Now let's shift gears and steer towards our next point. Number 4. Interwoven economies, the cross-border energy and material dance. Underneath tariff debates and political posturing lies a complex network of economic interdependencies binding the US and Canada. American industries rely on a steady influx of Canadian energy and raw materials, from crude oil and natural gas to critical minerals like cobalt, nickel, and lithium, that keep factories running and power sectors like automotive and aerospace. In 2024, US imports of Canadian energy products reached billions, underscoring that even a powerhouse like the US cannot operate in isolation. However, this interdependence is a double-edged sword. While it fuels production, it also creates vulnerabilities during political tensions. Disruptions could trigger higher production costs, rising consumer prices, and lost global competitiveness. Thus, preserving stable, open trade is essential for sustaining innovation, industry growth, and economic stability in an interconnected world. Open trade fuels progress. Number 3. Economic dominoes, how trade disruptions impact industries and consumers. Tariffs and trade skirmishes send shockwaves well beyond boardrooms, affecting everyday consumers and industries alike. The US, heavily reliant on Canadian energy exports, from crude oil and natural gas to electricity, faces potential disruptions that force industries to scramble for costlier alternatives. Even minor hiccups can trigger production delays, soaring operating costs, and rising prices. This domino effect reaches all corners of the economy, from automotive manufacturing to essential services. When one component is delayed or priced higher, the ripple effect can lead to increased fuel costs and inflated product prices for consumers. Essentially, every tariff imposed risks jamming the economic engine, pushing us closer to widespread inflation and an overall slowdown. Number 2. Diplomatic drifts, the strategic game of trade. Trade is a global chess match, and the US and Canada are intensifying their political maneuvers to safeguard national interests. US policies boosting domestic production conflict with North America's interdependent economy, prompting Canadian leaders to leverage their role as key energy and raw material suppliers. Their countermeasures, such as potential electricity export cuts and discussions on oil restrictions, aim to pressure American decision-makers, challenging the US energy grid and forcing a reassessment of protectionist policies. These high-stakes moves ripple beyond economics, affecting border security, technology investments, and government contracts. Third parties like Mexico are watching closely. Overall, each diplomatic maneuver carries risks and rewards, shaping the long-term framework of international trade and security in today's interconnected world. These moves underscore a fierce global contest. This rivalry is reshaping global power balances. Number 1. Pricing and policy, impacting your wallet and the future. After exploring energy exports, tariffs, and political strategy, we now focus on how these factors hit your wallet. Disruptions in established trade can trigger immediate price swings. For instance, if Canada restricts its electricity exports, American households and businesses could face steep energy bills during peak demand. Likewise, limits on Canadian crude, crucial to US imports, might push up gasoline prices, affecting freight, manufacturing, and everyday goods. Tariffs on raw materials and consumer products add further cost pressures, potentially increasing vehicle prices and overall living expenses. Policymakers now face a balancing act, protecting domestic jobs while managing the realities of a globally interconnected trade network. Ultimately, these pricing and policy shifts shape both our economic stability and long-term growth. Final lap, navigating the energy trade frontier. In summary, Our journey has taken us from the explosive threat of cutting electricity exports to the intricate pricing impacts hitting your wallet. We've uncovered how energy dependencies, economic dominoes, and political power plays are reshaping the trade dynamics between Canada and the US. The stakes are transformative, and the road ahead promises to be as dynamic as the engines we love. What are your thoughts on how these trade moves might affect the automotive world and your everyday expenses? Share your experiences in the comments below. If you enjoyed this ride, be sure to subscribe for more vehicle updates and upcoming videos. Your insights help drive our journey forward, fueling discussions and innovations in the automotive industry. Thanks for tuning in and riding with us at Piston Pundit. See you next time.
Something unprecedented is unfolding. Something that could change the future of North America forever. Canada, that seemingly quiet neighbor to the north, has just made a jaw-dropping declaration. They could shut off the power to the United States. Yes, you heard that right. With the U.S. facing a growing series of internal and external crises, one move from Canada could send shockwaves through the nation's entire power grid. This isn't just a trade dispute. It's a high-stakes game with real-world consequences. What does this mean for the U.S.? For the world? Stick with us, because this is a tale of political maneuvering, economic leverage, and potentially the biggest crisis the U.S. energy sector has ever faced. You'll want to stay until the very end, as the implications of this decision will reach far beyond North America. For most, Canada's role in the U.S. energy grid is invisible, yet vital. What if I told you that almost a quarter of America's power comes from this northern neighbor? That's right. 1/4 of the electricity used by millions of Americans comes straight from Canada. But this relationship runs deeper than just numbers on a map. For the last century, the U.S. and Canada have been locked in an energy bond, a mutual dependency. Without Canada's energy, much of the U.S. would be left in the dark. Industries would grind to a halt, factories would shut down, and basic utilities like heating and cooling would be interrupted. A crisis of this magnitude could be devastating for an already fragile U.S. economy. So, what's brought us here? Why has Canada suddenly decided that shutting off the power could be a legitimate option? The answer lies in escalating trade disputes that have reached a boiling point. The U.S. has been imposing tariffs on Canadian goods for months, targeting everything from steel to natural resources. But now, things are escalating even further, with talk of taxes, economic sanctions, and trade barriers that threaten Canada's economic future. Canada, understandably, isn't standing idly by. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's government has been forced to act, and it's becoming clear that energy could be the weapon they've been holding back for years. This isn't just about trade, it's about power. Literal power. Yes, Canada can, and they're not afraid to use it. The sheer scope of Canada's hydroelectric infrastructure gives it unmatched leverage. This isn't an idle threat. Canada controls vast hydropower resources that are essential for the U.S. grid, particularly in the Northeast. The U.S. needs Canadian electricity, and if Canada decides to halt these exports, it could leave entire regions scrambling for energy alternatives. A trade war, no matter how tense, has always had a clear endgame: negotiate, reach a deal, and move on. But Canada's latest move takes the concept of leverage to a whole new level. Electricity isn't just a bargaining chip, it's a potential economic weapon. When trade talks get heated, the world watches the US and China, the US and Mexico. But now, all eyes are on the US and Canada, and the clock is ticking. As tariffs mount, Canada is sending a bold signal. If the US thinks it can bully its way through these trade disputes, it might just be playing with fire. With energy supply on the table, the stakes have never been higher. Let's make one thing crystal clear. Hydropower is Canada's ultimate trump card. This isn't a resource the US can just replace on a whim. Hydroelectric power is not only incredibly efficient, It's renewable, clean, and deeply embedded in the fabric of North America's energy system. If Canada cuts off this power, the U.S. faces an energy black hole, and the repercussions would extend far beyond the grid. Factories would freeze, cities would be plunged into darkness, and chaos would ensue. The scale of this move is staggering, and Canada knows it. If Canada pulls the plug, it's not just a matter of flipping a switch. The economic ramifications are staggering. The U.S. economy relies on Canadian electricity to power key industries, from tech to manufacturing. Think of the millions of jobs tied to those industries. Now, imagine them grinding to a halt. As power prices soar and supply chains are interrupted, American households could face higher electricity bills, and businesses might be forced to shut down. This could tip the U.S. into an energy crisis of unprecedented scale. Is Washington prepared for this? It's not just the U.S. that will feel the shockwaves. A standoff between the U.S. and Canada over energy will reverberate across the globe. The global energy market is interconnected, and any disruption in energy supply from one major player, like Canada, has the potential to skyrocket global energy prices. If the U.S. is forced to turn to alternative suppliers, it could trigger a global energy shortage, impacting everything from oil prices to natural gas futures. This is a global game of high-stakes chess, and Canada's move is nothing less than a check on the U.S. economy. For years, the U.S. and Canada have been allies, but now Canada is redefining the relationship. Historically, the two nations have faced off over trade issues, but they've always found a way to cooperate. Now, the dynamics are shifting, and the once stable energy partnership is being re-examined. Canada is no longer the quiet neighbor. It's stepping into a role as a more independent, assertive player on the world stage. And the U.S.? It's reeling from the sudden realization that it's not in control anymore. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is not taking this decision lightly. This is a carefully calculated move to preserve Canada's economic sovereignty while forcing the U.S. to take Canada seriously. By positioning energy as leverage, Trudeau is ensuring that Canada's voice is heard on the global stage, and the message is clear: respect us or face the consequences. But the question remains, will it work? If Canada follows through and cuts off power, the consequences for the U.S. are going to be huge. The U.S. isn't ready for this type of shock, no matter how much it tries to prepare. The country still relies heavily on Canadian energy imports, and there are no easy fixes. Sure, the U.S. is working on alternative sources, but this takes time, years, even decades. Canada's electricity isn't something the U.S. can replace quickly. The economy would struggle, power bills would go up, and businesses would suffer. This isn't just about fixing a problem today, it's about years of work ahead. The longer this goes on, the more damage it can cause, and the U.S. would be playing catch-up. What Canada has done isn't just a North American issue. The whole world is watching how energy is being used as leverage in political negotiations. We've seen countries use oil and gas before, but Canada is changing the game. It's showing the world that energy isn't just a product. It's a powerful tool in global politics. The way countries use energy to make deals, protect their interests, or punish others could look very different moving forward. Canada's choice to hold the U.S. hostage with its power supply could lead to more nations realizing that they too can use energy as leverage. If the U.S. allows this, energy diplomacy will never be the same again. So what's going to happen next? Will the U.S. back down, or will Canada's threat push things into even deeper conflict? The way things are going, it's hard to say for sure, but what's certain is that this is a major turning point in U.S.-Canada relations. If the two countries can't come to an agreement, this could quickly escalate into something much bigger. A full-blown trade war that impacts not just electricity, but everything from tariffs to supply chains. It's not just about who blinks first, It's about the long-term effects of this power struggle. The future is unclear, and both sides know that the next move will have lasting consequences. The energy standoff between Canada and the US isn't just a one-time problem. It's something that could change the entire future of North American energy. If the US is forced to deal with higher energy prices, fewer resources, and more tension with Canada, it could shift the balance of power in the region. No longer will Canada be seen as a dependable partner. It could become a stronger, more independent force in the global energy game. If the US loses its grip on energy sources, it might find itself at the mercy of other nations. Canada, once a quiet ally, could become an economic powerhouse in its own right. North America's power dynamics may never look the same. At this point, it's clear. The energy crisis in the US has only just begun. Canada's move to threaten the power supply could send the US into a crisis that doesn't just affect electricity prices, but could ripple through the economy, touching every aspect of American life. The stakes are massive. The US can't afford to ignore what's happening, and the rest of the world? They'll be paying close attention. If Canada can use its energy supply as a bargaining chip, who's next? The global balance of power could be shifting in ways that no one saw coming. The consequences of this standoff will echo for years to come. So, what do you think? Will Canada actually follow through with this? Or will the US find a way to avoid the disaster that's looming? One thing's for sure. This crisis is far from over, and the consequences are going to be felt across North America and the world. The energy game is changing, and what happens next could reshape the entire balance of power. But we're just getting started. So, if you want to stay ahead of the curve and keep up with the latest developments, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Don't miss out on the future of energy, trade wars, and global politics, right here in real time. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.
We're closing the border, and we're drilling.
And you keep us moving towards energy independence.
Our country must cut back its reliance on foreign oil.
I said, we're going to need oil for at least another decade. See, and beyond that, we're going to need it.
Based on how much politicians talk about oil and using the oil reserves, I always kind of thought the U.S. was running out.
We've got about 35 years worth of oil left in the whole world.
But I couldn't be more wrong.
In just the 10 years after 2008, the U.S. went from a place with slowly dropping oil production to more than doubling its output and reclaiming its spot as the biggest oil producer in the world.
But there's something peculiar. The US is sending away nearly a third of its oil just to get it swapped out with oil from somewhere else. This is the story of America's wild oil revolution and why it still won't give the US energy independence. This video is brought to you by Read, Write, Own, but more on that a little later. To understand America's relationship with oil, let's start with a quick crash course. So for most of the last 150 years, the US has been the place to get oil. We drilled almost all of it, and we also used the most oil in the world. But in the late 1930s, other countries, namely Saudi Arabia and a few other Middle Eastern countries, realized they also have tons of oil. So they started drilling like crazy. Around this time, the US starts importing a little bit of oil, but it still drills most of it itself. But America's ravenous demand for oil to fuel its planes, trains, and automobiles can't be contained. America's demand for oil starts significantly outpacing US production. So bring in the imports. Pretty quickly, the US becomes increasingly reliant on foreign oil. But then in 1973, after the US gave money to Israel, Saudi Arabia's enemy in the Yom Kippur War, they and other Arabian oil exporters were like, actually no more oil for you, and imports slide. The US doesn't have enough oil to make up for this loss, so there's just no oil for consumers.
Gasoline stations ran dry.
Empty gas pumps, no more road trips.
To be sure that there is enough oil to go around for the entire winter all over the country, it will be essential for all of us to live and work in lower temperatures.
The problem was so bad that President Nixon literally told businesses to stop working if it would save energy.
I am directing that the daytime temperatures in federal offices be reduced immediately to a level of between 65 and 68 degrees. And that means in this room too.
And with this, the US really starts talking about this thing called energy independence, and the US's crippling lack of it. To respond, Nixon bans oil exports from the US and makes a plan to build 1,000 nuclear power plants by the year 2000. According to one estimate, if all of these nuclear power plants were actually built, the US would be able to meet twice its energy demands in 2022, with no fossil fuel emissions from the production. But instead, there's 54. Anyway, in the meantime, the US needs more oil, because those gas engines aren't going to run themselves. But that's a little awkward, because the US still can't find that oil in its own soil. We start importing more oil from Canada, our pretty peaceful neighbor, but our oil habit still requires we bring in a bunch from the Middle East. It's in this context, slowly getting more oil from Canada, using a lot from OPEC countries, and not getting much here, that perfectly sets up a revolution. So as you can see, the line that I'm on right now is going down. And a similar thing is happening with natural gas, the other big fuel source we use in America, that's collected largely the same way as oil. You'd think that it's going down because we're out of oil, but that's actually not true at all. The US had and still has tons of oil. The problem was we couldn't get it. This is the Barnett Shale. It's a giant natural gas reserve around Fort Worth, Texas, and in 1995, the US government said it had just like a bunch of natural gas in it. But it was unconventional. See, there are two ways that things we want tend to exist underground: conventionally or unconventionally.
The conventional oil wells were just, think about a big oil puddle underneath the ground. You're just tapping it like a straw and sucking it out. We still have plenty of wells like that, like Saudi Arabia, the Middle East. They basically have that kind of oil in plentiful, right? That's why it's super cheap.
But this Barnett Shale is not like that. It's made up of these big rocks called shale that have natural gas and some oil trapped inside of them. But the question is how to get in. People have kind of known the answer for a long time was fracturing the rock, or fracking. Even John Wilkes Booth, a month before he killed Abe Lincoln, was a fracker. But the problem with early fracking was it didn't always work super well. Like for John Wilkes Booth. He put some explosives into a well and made a huge hole, but there wasn't a drop of oil left. So naturally, he left Pennsylvania and killed the president, I guess. See, this is the type of anger not getting oil can give to people, especially when they spend tons of money on it. So in the late 1990s, when this guy named George Mitchell was looking at his document that said, all of your land on the Barnett Shale has tons of gas stuck in it, but you can't get it, he might have had murder on his mind. He was hemorrhaging cash trying to get fracking to work when his team switched things up a little bit. They used a newer technique of cracking open the rocks by shooting in a special water-based mixture and drilled sideways instead of just straight down. With the perfect tweaks, production gushed. A revolution. This finally made it fast and cheap enough to drill all of the lush resources trapped in America's shale. For a few years, producers were still skeptical. But then in 2008, oil prices hit all-time highs. Interest rates hit all-time lows, and from 2008 to 2018, the US doubles its oil production. And in 2015, they lift the ban on exporting US oil, which explains this graph. This increase isn't 100% because of fracking, but it's mostly fracking. So this explains how we got to where we are, where the US has a surprisingly high amount of oil because of this new technological innovation. But there's still something weird going on. The US produces pretty close to the amount of oil that Americans use. And yet, we send a huge portion of it out of the country just to get different oil from other countries and bring it back to America. There's some strange logistics that explain why this international oil swap is happening.
So the one remaining part that we still haven't really talked about between oil being in the ground and actually getting used is refining. For any oil from anywhere to actually be used, it first has to be refined. Otherwise, it's just this thick, black, toxic sludge that really can't be used for anything. So the refinery I'm going to right now will help explain why American oil isn't always the best answer. This is Chevron's El Segundo oil refinery, which is one of the biggest oil refineries on the West Coast. And most of the oil it's cooking isn't American. Instead, it's coming from one of these ships, which sit a couple miles offshore and quietly get their oil sucked out through these big pipes. In October of last year, the most recent data we have, this refinery got crude oil from South Korea, Argentina, Guyana, Mexico, and Colombia. And it's not just this refinery.
Another Chevron in California imported crude oil from Iraq, Venezuela to Mississippi, Canada to Michigan, and even Texas, the state that drills almost half of the US's crude oil, imported 26 million barrels of crude just last October. Quick interlude, this honestly probably won't help you that much, but a barrel of oil is 42 gallons, so kind of similar to a bathtub.
So this seems like a lot of work to just move all this oil around when we have it right here, but we just don't use it. So why don't we use our own oil?
Well, there's a few reasons we don't. So first of all, a lot of American oil does stay in America. Like Texas drills a ton of oil and then refines it down the street. Then Texans can pump it into their pickup truck at a gas station. When it's all really close like this, almost all transportation costs are gone, which is why Texas has some of the lowest gas prices in the union. But the first problem is that not all the oil is next to a refinery, and the refineries aren't always next to the people who need it.
We'll use Los Angeles as an example. In 2021, California used 605 million barrels of oil. The state happens to be one of the largest producers in the country, so part of that oil comes from inside the state.
Like a few miles from this refinery is an oil field in the middle of LA, and there are some other famously hidden oil wells that are scattered throughout the city and next to people's houses.
But all of the oil drilled in California still only accounts for a fifth of what it needs. So how about we just bring in some extra from Texas?
For most of the country, there's a system of oil pipelines that take oil from the places where lots of oil is being produced to the people who want it. But California is an exception. The state and its almost 40 million residents have no crude oil pipelines coming in, and they probably never will. That's because even if the oil from Texas came to California, most refineries in the state wouldn't be able to use it. This is the biggest reason the US can't use its own oil. It's just not the right type. Let me explain. For simplicity's sake, I got this from the Explain Like I'm 5 subreddit. Let's imagine there are two types of oil in the world. One is strawberry, and the other is chocolate. For a long time, the US produced a bunch of chocolate oil. So to use it, we also created a bunch of refineries that turned chocolate into gold. Not actually gold, but you know what I mean. But then over time, especially with the use of fracking, the US oil supply became a lot more strawberry. And those chocolate refineries can't use that. If they do, they'll have some really big problems. Oil refiners could create more refineries if they wanted, but according to one commentator, the US government's environmental standards and push to abandon fossil fuels makes it a risky investment. This might be why the last significant oil refinery built in the US was made almost 50 years ago. So instead of going through the super expensive process of updating America's refineries to use strawberry oil, refiners decided it would be a better idea to just import chocolate oil from other countries who still make it and use that in our chocolate refineries. Then just send all that strawberry oil overseas where they have refineries for it. So this is why in 2022, 59% of oil going to California refineries came from foreign countries, and 80% of El Segundo's oil originates abroad. And despite exporting more, the US still imports pretty hefty sums of oil. The real picture is more complicated than this. Like there's a whole range of differences in oil types, and refiners don't just use one super specific type, but the end result is the same. The companies who buy and sell oil decided that keeping the same refineries in America and just importing the right type of oil just makes them more money than using oil from the States. And that leads us to the final concern a lot of people have about American oil.
Energy independence.
Energy independence.
The concept of energy independence is this really nice idea. It gives these vibes of ultimate control over one's destiny. No other country can decide whether we have power. And it seems like it's just like the logical answer. If we make it ourselves, it can be closer and cheaper, maybe? But the reality is that in a lot of cases, it's just not.
It would be very, very disruptive to the economy for the US to say all of a sudden, we're not importing or we're not exporting. We're just going to we're just going to work with what we have. The Chicago refineries would find they have no oil to refine. It would take decades to sort that out. It would be a mess.
The biggest factor in gas prices is nothing more than the international cost of oil, which the US only has a small part in determining. And then beyond price, just because oil is close doesn't mean we can use it.
You'll hear, Joe Biden screwed up and that's why we don't have energy independence. But we never have had energy independence. And every country should worry about energy security. That they have enough energy to meet the needs and demands of the economy, of the people, of the consumers. The U.S. has energy security.
Focusing on energy security instead of independence is why I've been slowly riding up this Canadian line for so long. Historically speaking, it's a lot less likely that the US gets in a fight with Canada than it will a country in the Middle East. So it's a pretty safe bet their oil will be there for us. And as for our oil addiction, as much as some people would like to stop using oil altogether, the US is still highly dependent on it.
We have to do our best to march along this transition in a very determined way to make sure that not only we are mitigating climate change, greenhouse gas emissions, limiting local environmental harm, but also keeping energy affordable. We have to make sure that our most vulnerable communities are taken care of.
If the US keeps drilling oil here versus abroad, the world might benefit somewhat from the country's relatively low greenhouse gas emissions from production, but at the end of the day, to curb emissions, the oil needs to stay in the ground.
So I don't want to be sounding like a brash, just environmentalist who are we just need to do clean energy technology and just stop all fossil fuels. That cannot happen overnight, but it can happen faster than what we can think and what possibly the fossil fuel industry thinks it can happen.
And while America and the rest of the world are still figuring out how they'll find energy security, let's discuss one other thing that needs security, privacy, and freedom. I want to tell you about Read, Write, Own, Building the Next Era of the Internet, a new book from entrepreneur and investor Chris Dixon. Read, Write, Own asks the consequential question, who should decide the future of the internet? It's a question that's been increasingly debated as we grapple with the fundamental concepts of privacy and freedom. In Read, Write, Own, Dixon argues an alternative to today's internet, where blockchains reclaim control for people. Blockchains are for more than trading and speculating on cryptocurrencies. They're a new kind of computer, like construction material, that could be used to build a better internet, that can shift ownership of digital services from big centralized platforms to decentralized applications that put people in charge. Read, Write, Own offers a vision for the internet where people can own, co-create, and profit from the platforms they use and make useful every day. Order your copy today or go to readwriteown.com to learn more.
Greenland has attracted attention in recent years because of its geostrategic location and rich underground resources. Melting glaciers have the potential to open up new sea routes, and these routes are of great importance for both energy and trade. Therefore, it is in a critical position in terms of both the competition of big powers and regional independence movements. While Russia and China are rapidly increasing their presence in the Arctic, the U.S. does not want to be left behind. It was precisely in this process, during the presidency of Donald Trump, that the idea of buying Greenland was put forward.
And Canada wants to join us in the buying of icebreakers. I said, we don't really want to have a partner.
Especially since the day Donald Trump expressed his intention to buy Greenland during his presidency, geopolitical debates over the island have become more heated. The reciprocal moves by Russia, China, the United States, and Denmark have placed Greenland at the center of an international power struggle beyond the continent. Donald Trump's attempt to buy Greenland was initially perceived as a misleading political stunt. But the more time passes, the deeper the geopolitical impact of this unexpected move becomes clearer. So what are the facts behind Trump's Greenland move? What is the connection between the U.S. strategic perspective on Greenland and the global hegemony of Russia and China? And what is the connection between Russia and China's Arctic ambitions and Greenland? Is an Arctic alliance between Russia and China possible against Trump's move? We will now take a closer look at why Trump wants Greenland and whether this region can be used by the U.S. to block Russia and China. But first, please don't forget to subscribe to our channel, turn on notifications, and give us a like to stay up to date with our content. Let's get started. Greenland is a huge mineral-rich region in the Arctic, where melting glaciers are opening up new sea routes and economic opportunities. Melting glaciers have the potential to open up new sea routes, and these routes are of great importance for both energy and trade. Greenland is the largest ice cap in the Arctic, covering about 2.2 square kilometers north of the Atlantic Ocean. Greenland, which has a population of about 58,000 and is constantly melting due to the effects of global warming, is on the radar of the new U.S. government. President Donald Trump has sparked diplomatic controversy by claiming that the U.S. should buy Greenland for national security reasons and refusing to rule out the use of military force to do so.
Well, we need Greenland for national security purposes.
In response to Trump's statements, Danish Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen said that Greenland, Denmark's self-governing territory, was not for sale. The dialogue between the two has caused political and military tremors that have led to a global crisis. Trump's interest in Greenland is not new. Donald Trump first expressed his fondness for the region in 2019.
Well, Greenland, I don't know, it got released somehow. It's just something we talked about. Denmark essentially owns it.
However, the U.S. leader's rhetoric never translated into any action. It remains to be seen whether Trump has real plans this time around to advance any attempt to seize Greenland in the Washington administration. First of all, Donald Trump's first thought is that he wants to exploit the natural resources of the Arctic for U.S. interests. The U.S. presence in Greenland is not new. Already in the 1950s, the Thule Air Force Base was established, which was later transferred to the U.S. Space Force and renamed Patuxent Spaceport. It is a crucial point for missile early warning, satellite tracking, and military logistics. These systems are critical for monitoring possible intercontinental ballistic missile activities by Russia and China. If the U.S. gains more authority over Greenland, it will expand the capabilities of this base and gain a powerful leverage against Russia's and even China's activities in the Arctic. These military calculations are clearly behind Trump's buyout proposal. This is seen as the clearest economic message to China and Russia. But does Greenland have the structure to meet Trump's Arctic-based economic plan? Greenland's most valuable natural resources lie in its vast mineral wealth, which has real potential to advance its economy. Identified deposits include precious metals such as gold and platinum, a range of base metals such as zinc, iron, copper, nickel, cobalt, and uranium, and rare earth elements such as neodymium, dysprosium, and praseodymium. A detailed 2023 summary published by the Geological Survey of Denmark and Greenland suggests that new deposits will be found as the retreat of the Greenland ice sheet continues. Greenland's rare earth resources are particularly critical. These elements are important not only for battery, solar, and wind technology, but also for military applications. If fully developed, the Kvanefjeld or Quanersut in Greenlandic uranium and rare earth deposit would put Greenland among the top producers worldwide. But who controls all these resources? In the 2010s, Greenland's leaders encouraged interest from outside mining companies, including leading Chinese companies, and eventually signed a lease to the Australian company Energy Transition Minerals, formerly Greenland Minerals. The acquisition of a major stake in Energy Transition Minerals by China's Shenghe Resources was a red flag for Denmark, the European Union, and the United States, who saw the Beijing regime as trying to increase its global dominance of the rare earths market while Europe was trying to reduce its own potential supply. The issue was shelved in 2021 when Greenland's parliament banned all uranium mining, halting further development of Kvanefjeld for the time being. In the same year, the government also further banned any oil and gas activity. Predictably, the majority of mining companies subsequently stayed away from Greenland due to concerns that any investment would be jeopardized by future political decisions. But there was one country that did not stay away from Greenland. And that is China, as we can all guess. China's interest in Greenland goes back at least a decade. In 2015, Greenland's Minister of Finance and Home Affairs, Vitis Kojau-Kitsok, visited China to discuss possible investments in mining, hydropower, port, and other infrastructure projects. A firm called China Communications Construction Company bid to build 2 airports, one in the capital Nuuk and one in Ilulissat. Another Chinese firm, General Nice Group, offered to buy an abandoned Danish naval base in northeast Greenland, while the Chinese Academy of Sciences requested to build a permanent Research Center and satellite ground station near Nuuk. None of this was in line with the first Trump administration, which pressured Denmark to convince the Greenlandic government that a significant and official Chinese presence on the island was undesirable. The Danes and Greenlanders have therefore rejected Chinese attempts to invest in Greenland-based projects. In particular, the Trump administration believed that China's interest in Greenland had ulterior commercial and military motives. These concerns have continued with the Biden administration's recent lobbying of another Australian mining company not to sell any of its Greenland assets to Chinese companies. U.S. interest in Greenland is much older than China's. The U.S. has had a long-standing security interest in Greenland since 1946, when it offered Denmark $100 million worth of gold bullion. The Danes politely but firmly rejected the offer, and their foreign minister said they did not feel they owed them the whole island. In the early 1950s, the U.S. built Thule Air Force Base 750 miles north of the Arctic Circle. Originally a missile early warning and radio communications base, it was transferred to the newly established U.S. Space Force in 2020. The site was renamed Pituffik Spaceport in 2023. As the northernmost U.S. military facility, Pituffik updated its radar and tracking capabilities to provide missile warning, defense, and space surveillance, and satellite command missions. It also supported scientific research focused on the Arctic, while the base was intended to increase military capabilities in the Arctic region for both the U.S. and its allies. The base had both real and symbolic significance for American strategic interests in the Arctic, as it had the ability to track shipping and air and satellite positions. The actual real importance of the base is quite critical. It acts as a roadblock against missiles from China, Russia, and even North Korea. This is one of the main reasons why Trump wants Greenland. This is why most of the U.S. foreign policy establishment, not just those in Trump's orbit, view with concern any significant Chinese presence in Greenland, whether temporary or permanent, and the potential risk factors posed by Russia and North Korea in the region. While international law does not recognize national sovereignty in international waters, it has done little to end the diplomatic wrangling over this pole. This issue over Greenland was far from trivial. Sovereignty would give a country access to potentially important oil, gas, and rare earth resources, as well as superior scientific and military access to the future transpolar sea route. Yet, this dispute over ownership of the Arctic is only part of the geopolitical struggle for offshore territory in the region. What is the link between the U.S. strategic perspective on Greenland and the global hegemony of Russia and China? Trump's Greenland move has galvanized other actors in the region. Russia has the world's longest coastline in the Arctic. It has long sought to revitalize the Northern Sea Route with its icebreaker fleets. China, on the other hand, defines itself as an almost Arctic country and is eyeing natural resources and new trade routes. Beijing is trying to legitimize its presence in the north with its Arctic Silk Road rhetoric, while cooperating with Russia on a limited basis. The U.S. acquisition of Greenland is seen as a move that could complicate the plans of both states. Trump's proposal was therefore carefully watched in Moscow and Beijing. On the Russian side, Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov criticized Trump's proposal, saying, "If the United States is planning such an expansion, the Arctic will heat up." Russian ambassadors reacted by saying that Trump's intentions could destabilize the region. At the same time, extreme rhetoric emerged in the Russian media. If Trump can take Greenland, let's take back the territories we lost. Nevertheless, at the official level, Russia has endeavored to remain on the line of, "This is a matter between Denmark and the United States. It does not directly concern us." In China, the issue has taken on a different dimension. Some nationalist circles began to ask, if Trump believes he can seize Greenland despite Denmark, can he make extraordinary moves in Taiwan? On the other hand, radical commentators argued, if the U.S. can act so aggressively, why shouldn't we annex Taiwan altogether? In other words, Trump's Greenland outburst was used as a precedent to encourage the nationalist wing in Beijing to take a tougher stance on Taiwan. When Russian President Vladimir Putin first heard about Trump's Greenland ambitions, he interpreted them as new U.S. expansion plans. While Moscow was already largely trying to assert itself in the Arctic, the U.S.'s expansion of its interests over Greenland worried Russia. Russia's rapprochement with China can also be seen in this context. If the U.S. is seizing Greenland in spite of Denmark, Russia needs to find partners. The Kremlin has often signaled that it could take joint steps with China against the West's Arctic strategy. This suggests that the Greenland debate, which has heated up in the Trump era, is somehow affecting Russia as well. While Russia's increasing militarization of its vast coastal region has been met with NATO military exercises in northern Scandinavia, China's moves into the Arctic, with Moscow's help, have seen the launch of several research stations backed by icebreakers and agreements for research and commercial projects. The Chinese government has also claimed rights to navigation, fishing, overflight, investment in oil and gas projects, and more. Russia was the most important architect of the Beijing regime's deep dominance in the Arctic. For this reason, U.S. President-elect Donald Trump's statements that the purchase of Greenland would not exempt economic or military instruments drew critical reactions from Russian officials. Russian officials described the development as dramatic and predicted uncertainty and tension in the region. Trump's statements, which mentioned Russian ships everywhere around Greenland, received disapproving feedback from Russian officials and diplomats. Dmitry Peskov, the Russian president's press secretary, said that so far they were carefully following the U.S. rhetoric on Greenland. Dmitry Peskov emphasized that Moscow is interested in keeping the Arctic peaceful and stable, and that the region is a zone of Russia's national and strategic interests. While the Kremlin is monitoring Trump's proposals regarding Greenland, Peskov said Moscow believes that the situation is part of Washington's bilateral relations with Copenhagen. Meanwhile, Peskov added that Europe reacted very carefully, modestly, quietly, almost in a whisper. The Kremlin spokesman also took the opportunity to link the situation to Russia's military actions in Ukraine. Peskov suggested that if everyone is emphasizing the need to listen to the wishes of the people of Greenland, then it is probably necessary to recall the views of the people of the 4 new regions of the Russian Federation. On the other hand, Russian diplomats in the Arctic countries criticized Trump's statements and pointed to the possibility of instability in the region. Russian ambassador to Denmark, Vladimir Barbin, noted that U.S. attempts to ensure its national security at the expense of the interests of other nations could lead to a further deterioration of the situation in the Arctic, which Russia will take into account in its military planning. The Russian ambassador noted that the future of Greenland should be determined by the will of the Greenlanders themselves, within the framework of Danish law and without outside interference. Russian ambassador to Norway and former senior Arctic official Nikolai Korchunov expressed concern about possible instability and suggested that Trump's proposal could only bring uncertainty and tension to the region. According to the ambassador, Greenland and Denmark are not the only Arctic states feeling pressure on their sovereignty. Korchunov believes that it cannot be ruled out that the Trump administration might show interest in Norway's Svalbard archipelago. The Russian ambassador in Oslo called for policy formulation on the basis of international law, the principles of mutual consideration of interests and inclusive dialogue, stressing that this development for the transfer of the chairmanship of the Arctic Council from Norway to Denmark in 2025. In general, according to Korchunov, the situation could lead to a negative situation with growing instability in the Arctic and growing mutual distrust between the Arctic Council members. Russian Foreign Ministry spokesperson Maria Zakharova said it was too early to comment on Trump's Greenland proposal and that they should ask him questions. In some ways, the reaction of Russian officials to the Greenland crisis resembles Russia's reaction to the unilateral expansion of continental shelf claims by the United States and predictions of rising tensions as a result of this move. While Russian officials have consistently expressed concern and highlighted the potential for instability, some Russian political commentators have gleefully reacted to Trump's proposals on late-night talk shows broadcast on Russian state television channels. Although these views were expressed on state television, they represented the fringes of Russian commentary and differed from the statements of officials and some Russian academics. Such statements were met with laughter on the talk show. Television presenter Vladimir Solovyov agreed with Trump's statements and suggested that Finland, Warsaw, the Baltic states, Moldova, and Tallinn should return. According to Vladimir Solovyov, all these territories should join the Russian Empire, followed by Alaska. This statement was characterized as unrealistic, the words of someone who had lost his mind. During the same talk show, military analyst Mikhail Khodoryanok suggested that after Trump's statement on Greenland, special military operations to settle disputes between countries should now be considered the norm. On the other hand, television presenter Dmitry Kiselyov said on his weekly news program that he was almost certain that Trump would succeed in his determination to expand American territory because Denmark had seceded from Greenland's sovereignty long before Anderson's fairy tales, and he predicted that NATO countries would not protect Denmark. Following such shocking statements, Russian political experts have argued that Trump is unlikely to enter into a conflict with NATO allies over Greenland because his proposal is unlikely to receive significant support from the Greenlandic population. Political scientist Fyodor Lukyanov noted that Denmark has never denied Greenlanders their right to self-determination, although independence has been a Greenlandic policy goal. Fyodor Lukyanov thinks that Greenland's status within the Kingdom of Denmark is unlikely to change. Lukyanov also points out that, despite the extraordinary processes we are going through, it would be impossible to imagine the forcible seizure of part of the territory of one NATO member state by another NATO member state. Political scientist Dmitry Zhuravlev described Trump's statements as naive. However, Zhuravlev added that Trump's desire to expand U.S. control in North America is linked to shipping, and that Greenland is a blockage for the Northern Sea Route. Still, according to experts and political scientists, it remains an open question whether the U.S. will use coercive economic policies in the form of tariffs against Denmark to give itself leverage in negotiations to acquire Greenland. The attitude of the people on the island is crucial. In 2008, Greenland voted for nationhood. The island receives an annual subsidy of 500 million euros, or $513 million from Denmark, and is seeking foreign investment to further economic independence. With this kind of mindset, it seems unlikely that Greenland will be annexed to the U.S. under Trump's proposal. Trump's recent statements have the potential to achieve something very different from what he intended, such as encouraging Greenland's Prime Minister, Mute Egede, to propose a referendum on full independence in 2025. In another perspective, China's interest could accompany Greenland's moves towards independence, supported by Beijing's strategy of becoming an Arctic player. Over time, the Beijing regime could show its true intentions, namely to build a playing field with Russia in the Arctic. The thinking in Beijing may be that an independent Greenland would be less dependent on NATO and the European Union, and therefore more open to investment from further afield. The Russian side, as we mentioned, thinks like China on this issue. The Moscow regime is of course aware that Greenland would suffer a serious loss of power in the Arctic if it were to fall under U.S. control. Is an Arctic alliance between Russia and China possible against Trump's move? Russia has the largest coastline in the Arctic. China, on the other hand, wants to use its global economic power in the north to establish an ice silk road. The two countries occasionally draw attention with joint military exercises or nuclear icebreaker projects. However, experts say that Arctic cooperation between Russia and China is based on periodic interests and is not a deep strategic alliance. Nevertheless, they share the common goal of not allowing NATO expansion in the Arctic against the West. Trump's Greenland move may have reinforced the idea in Beijing that we need to work more closely with Russia against the US, which wants to control the Arctic. In short, the Greenland crisis has suddenly turned from a rhetoric initiated by the new US President Donald Trump into a raging storm involving Russia, China, and Denmark. All that is known so far is that the people of Greenland are demanding more freedom. However, experts are not optimistic about Greenland's future, as it remains to be seen whether Russia and China will take this approach. In the time to come, it will become clearer who will keep Greenland and who will dominate this island. Thank you for choosing us.
In recent months, a shift has been quietly unfolding within Europe, particularly in France. While much of the West, led by the US, has focused on sanctions against Russia due to the ongoing conflict with Ukraine, Europe has made a series of decisions that have caught the world off guard. These decisions, centered around energy and trade with Russia, have left many wondering, what's really going on behind the scenes in Europe? Despite the strong stance taken by many Western nations, Europe is still heavily reliant on Russian energy exports, particularly natural gas. In fact, 2025 has seen record levels of gas purchases from Russia, even as sanctions remain in place. This fact alone contradicts the narrative pushed by some in the US, who've been advocating for Europe to break free from its reliance on Russian energy. What is happening? Europe, led by countries like France, is quietly maneuvering to ensure its energy security, even if it means continuing its transactions with Russia. One of the most surprising revelations came when French and Danish shipyards were found repairing Russian gas tankers despite the ongoing sanctions. These shipyards, traditionally seen as key players in global energy infrastructure, have become essential in maintaining the flow of Russian gas to Europe. The shipyard's role in fixing these tankers has raised eyebrows, especially considering the US's stance on sanctions. This behind-the-scenes cooperation showcases the complex reality of European energy needs and how, despite public appearances, France and others are still engaging with Russia. The repairs being done by French and Danish shipyards aren't just symbolic. They are pivotal in keeping Russia's Arctic gas exports running smoothly through the harsh winter months. By maintaining these tankers, France ensures that vital energy resources continue flowing to Europe, especially during a time of record-high demand. The action has been a significant point of contention, but it underscores how difficult it is for Europe to extricate itself from Russia's energy supply, despite the sanctions. While publicly, Europe has adopted a firm stance in support of Ukraine, the reality on the ground tells a different story. In practice, Europe has been compelled to maintain trade relationships with Russia to ensure its energy needs are met. The EU's ability to secure energy supplies, whether gas or LNG, has often been made possible due to this quiet yet ongoing relationship with Russia. And with EU gas reserves dwindling, the urgency to keep those ties alive has never been more pronounced. French ports have played a vital role in supporting Russia's gas export infrastructure. These ports have been a key transit point for Russian liquefied natural gas, LNG, that finds its way into European markets. Despite public calls to halt such dealings, the French ports continue to work with Russia, keeping energy lines open and helping mitigate Europe's energy crisis. While many in the US would like to see a halt to Russian energy exports, the truth is that the global economy, especially Europe's, still depends on these exports. French ports, in particular, are crucial for the delivery of Russian gas and oil to the rest of Europe. This complex relationship highlights the tension between Europe's public stance on Russia and its private actions. For Europe to fully sever ties with Russia, it would take more than just political declarations. It would require a major shift in the continent's energy strategy. The United States has consistently called for a harder line on Russia, urging Europe to stop relying on Russian energy altogether. But Europe's quiet reliance on Russian exports has left the US speechless. What Europe has been doing, openly continuing trade and facilitating repairs on Russian vessels, has placed the US in an uncomfortable position. It seems that Europe's energy security and its diplomatic priorities are often at odds with the US's expectations. As the EU's second-largest economy, France has been walking a fine line between adhering to international sanctions and securing its energy future. France's decision to keep energy ties with Russia intact, despite the diplomatic pressure from Washington, reflects a practical approach to an increasingly complex geopolitical situation. For France, it's a matter of national interest, ensuring that its industries and homes continue to be powered without disruptions that could cause economic chaos. It's easy to say that Europe should just stop buying energy from Russia, but it's not that simple. European countries are dealing with energy demands that have skyrocketed in recent years, and Russian gas is crucial for meeting those needs. The alternative sources, such as LNG from the US, are limited and come with higher costs, making them less viable for many European countries. Russia's energy is affordable and reliable, and until Europe can find a stable alternative, cutting ties completely would mean an energy crisis on an unprecedented scale. One of the most important aspects of this situation is Russia's Arctic gas production. The Russian Arctic fields are critical to the country's ability to meet its export obligations, and France's involvement in maintaining the infrastructure around these fields is crucial for the continued flow of gas into Europe. The French shipyards play a direct role in ensuring that these energy supplies continue to reach the European market, even as political pressures mount. It's an important, though often overlooked, piece of the puzzle in Europe's energy strategy. The geopolitical complexity of Europe's position can't be overstated. On one hand, Europe must be seen as standing firm in its stance against Russia, especially as the conflict in Ukraine continues. On the other hand, the practical reality is that Europe simply cannot afford to cut off Russian energy supplies without risking a significant economic downturn. The delicate balancing act between maintaining national security and energy security is something that France, along with other European nations, must continuously navigate. As two of Europe's most prominent maritime nations, France and Denmark play an outsized role in facilitating the flow of Russian energy to the continent. Their shipyards and ports are vital to keeping the energy supply chain intact. In particular, France's repair services for Russian LNG tankers have allowed the Russian gas industry to continue operating through the harsh winter, demonstrating the intertwined nature of Europe's energy needs and its dealings with Russia. Looking ahead, Europe faces a difficult choice. With energy demands continuing to rise and Russian supplies still critical, how long can the EU continue to depend on Russia for its energy needs? The situation is complicated, and while Europe is diversifying its energy sources, Russia's presence in the energy market will not be easily replaced. In the coming years, EU-Russia energy relations may be defined by compromise, as both sides recognize the mutual dependence that exists. As Europe grapples with its energy future, the US's influence in shaping its energy policy cannot be ignored. The US has pushed for a reduction in Europe's reliance on Russian energy, but the question remains, will the US be able to force Europe's hand? With energy needs so high and Russia remaining a key player in the market, Europe's path forward may not align with US expectations. For now, France and other European nations seem to be taking a more cautious approach, continuing to engage with Russia while navigating the ever-changing geopolitical landscape. That wraps up today's discussion. If you found this information insightful, make sure to subscribe to the channel for more updates on global events and their impacts. We'll be back soon with more in-depth analysis. See you in the next video.
Welcome to your ultimate pit stop.
Okay, so we're back. I was trying to find the buttons there. But anyways, there's a lot going on, and a lot of it could be smoke and mirrors. So we have to really watch out for that. We have to look at all of the possibilities because, as I said, Elon Musk has been going to all of the countries. He does business in all of the countries. And now he's taken over the treasury of the United States computers. A private person, a private corporation. That should not even be allowed. So anyways, the people in the United States are in shell shock. They don't know what to do. No, everybody's just beside themselves as to what Trump is doing and what he's getting away with having bought and paid for people and threatening. So the help that they're going to need is going to have to come from the outside because they're too frozen in time. And this is what I mean by mass psychosis. And from what I can see is when you connect all of the dots since the onset of COVID, and you connect all of those coming right back around, if people think that Trump isn't for the WEF or Elon Musk, you've got another thing coming because all of the major corporations are part of this. A lot of them participate in the WEF, and the thing is who runs the WEF? But the Nazi Zionists, okay, are behind all of that. Kissinger, all of these people. So you have to connect the dots. You have to see where it's coming. And then in Canada, we have Stephen Harper in bed with Israel in the United States. In if you go to AWZ ventures.com, you will see that our own conservatives, and still Harper, even though he's not there, you still have Polyev that has that is underneath Harper under the idu.org. Okay, if you go to that website as well. And then you have Danielle Smith, who has Harper in her back pocket, making her do things. So again, we got to be very careful as to what's going on. A lot of this seems to be to shock the world. And how do you take over a country without having to go to war? Install a Trump and an Elon Musk and all the money, all the private corporations to be sitting behind, in the first row of governance at inauguration, and then place all of your people in government that you're going to have behind them. And then you'll see that everything is being done for corporations, deregulations, everything that they're doing, deregulating everything. It's just sickening. So every day I've never been so busy trying to keep up with the Trumps and the stupidity that this maniac is doing. And a lot of people need to see through him. So, nothing is good. But as far as Canadians go, we don't need to be all that worried. We need to tell our government, listen, we know what's up. We know how much we're valued. And just negotiate other stuff from elsewhere, and we don't have to worry about the United States. And the thing is the United States needs Canadian territory, Canadian resources, more than we need their security. Because, hey, Russia has security, China has security, the EU has security, the Commonwealth nations. So we have the Commonwealth realm, the 15 countries with us. So, I mean, we all intertrade. We all do these things. So is it such a big deal that Trump is making, 25%? He's keeping the energy only at 10% because he knows that the minute, that he goes even higher with that on energy, the lights are going to be closed. Well, the lights should be closed on Tuesday morning, and for as long as it takes for him to back off, because he's punishing Canadians when they're talking about products, hair products, whatever. I mean, that really doesn't hurt the government, does it? It hurts the people. It hurts the people on our side. It hurts the people on their side. So 25% tariffs. We might see it at the grocery stores. We might see it everywhere. So, hey, we have no need to be afraid. Our government needs to do their job and to ensure that that our products here in Canada does not get any higher, and they need to reduce their prices as well. So, anyways, time will tell to see what's going to happen. But I would put my hand in fire that this is the final stage to take over the United States, to crash the United States through Donald Trump and Elon Musk, and to turn our governments into private business corporations. Even though our governments are our business, this would be privately run, private corporations running all of our governance everywhere. And this is where private corporations are, that's the end game for the private corporations. And Elon Musk is doing a superb job of making sure that happens, and all of the tech bros. And if we're worried about, getting chips from the United States for our computers and stuff like that, you got to remember where most of the technology, electricity, comes from. Canadians. We're pretty bright people. I think we can come up with our own stuff, and they can shove their CBDC Bitcoin. So you're going to find out that Bitcoin is going to be regulated, and that's going to be your new CBDC, but it won't be dealt like Bitcoin. It'll be like CBDC. And this is why Russia said that, we're not trying to get rid of the US dollar. No, they're just going to be dealing in another dollar. They don't need to. I mean, we can use whatever monies we want. If we're dealing with France for products, we could, if they want to accept Canadian dollars, they accept Canadian dollars, and we can accept the francs. So international trade usually is done with the US dollar, but it doesn't need to be used, and it doesn't need to be trashed. It'll kill itself off by itself, because they won't be able to trade with anybody, and that's what's coming. But at the same time, all of that brings in global governance, corporate global governance, what the WEF has actually been working all along. And behind the WEF, the puppet masters, Nazi Zionists. Okay? So we got to really be vigilant. And the only thing that can stop this insanity is what we are doing at the Canadian People's Union. It's for all the peoples, and this is legal. All the peoples in each country must become the collective head of state with veto power over our governments when something happens, that we can have the final say, and they can't take over that. Nobody can take over our natural resources through economic means, because going through the economy, they don't have to go through governance. Okay, other than creating contracts, and contracts can be broken. So anyways, this is why all of this is happening. Don't lose sleep over these tariffs. If things get too expensive, then that's the problem. We're having a problem with our government and our private corporations here, like grocery stores and stuff, elevating fees. That should not be elevated at all. Okay, they should actually be reduced. So if we can focus on that, that's what we tell our government. So anyways, I'm going to be having a meeting on Tuesday at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time with our VIP members. Anyways, we're going to be covering a lot of this stuff and going more in depth. So please don't miss the meetings. And anybody who wants to join the CPU can go to the cpu.ca and join there as a VIP member. We're not giving out the $15 a month anymore, because if you want to join on another level, then you can go to canadianreferendum.ca, sign your referendum if you want to become collective head of state, because we can get this done once the people join in, and we have at least 51% of Canadians to sign on. And I want to clear something up, because in the UK documents, we need 25.5% of Quebec, 25.5% of Ontario, and then 50% within the rest of the provinces altogether. Okay, so do the math. We don't need 50% in Ontario and 50% in Quebec. We only need 25.5 in each of the provinces. Please go and sign. The faster we get to the 51% within 7 provinces, and that 50% within at least Quebec and Ontario together, that makes that 50%. They'll have no choice but to replace Charles, because as long as Charles is there, we don't get to have final say. And it's actually the Governor General that has those rights. I've taught you all about that. We're going to be covering some of that again on Tuesday. And the Governor General has her job to do. And if she doesn't, well, somebody needs to sue her. And if we get some support, I'm ready to go at it again, but this time the right way. Okay, so let's get this show on the road. Go to www.canadianreferendum.ca. Sign your referendum. Get everybody you know to sign it. Send it far and wide. Share it. This is the only legal solution in Canada that we, the people, have. And then this same solution can be had by the American citizens so that Trump can't become a dictator the way he has been, and firing everybody that, he's a criminal, and everybody that, investigated him, he's fired. He's fired all of the generals, the attorney generals, and also the people who are the eyes of reason, that are not even part of government, but their job is to make sure that, just like our ethics commissioners and all that, that nobody's stealing the money from the American citizens. So he's fired all of them. Why? Because he wants to have access to their treasury, and he already does. And that is dangerous. Okay? That is dangerous. He's a very dangerous little, well, I call him a criminal presidential toddler. Okay? Because he acts like it. And you get respect. Respect is earned, and he'll only get my respect once he earns it. And I doubt he'll live long enough. Okay? Or me. Because I don't think he knows how. The only one that Trump is, how can I say, true to is to himself. And a man that makes $5.8 billion on a meme coin, and pockets that and is all happy about that, and doesn't even give it back to the people he's supposed to be representing, or to the poor people. The ones who are standing with him right now could terminate, not even use all of their money, but could terminate, especially Trump with his $5.8 billion, could terminate hunger in the United States and homelessness. And that's the reality. Will they do it? They could probably cure it for the world. They won't. They're all about themselves. When Trump speaks, he's not talking about the little people. He's talking about his buddies, his tech bros, and all the corporations, and that he's buddies with. And maybe if he'd stay off the golf course for one day, he might be a half decent president. I'm totally on with what he did with the woke, because the woke and the transgender and the government corruption was all part and parcel in the pandemic, in creating a mass psychosis of the people. And now this is their second stage. So now, like many who injected people and those people died, guilt is felt by many in the medical sphere. And now the guilt is going to be placed on the American citizens for having voted for a toddler who lies every 2 seconds. So Pinocchio in the White House. So Pinocchio is in the White House. He still has the mind of a 5-year-old. and that's the President of the United States. I thought Trudeau was bad. I was ashamed of Trudeau. But oh my God, Trump takes the cake. And he's the WEF Trump card. And making him into saying he's the king, the incarnated king that will help Israel rebuild their third temple, and all of those stories they created and all the made up prophecy BS that they've created up to now. They don't fool me. Okay. And only by researching do you know the truth. Only by researching do you become fearless, because if they want to argue, at least I know that what I say, I can back it up. So, these guys in the United States are, why did Elon Musk be so excited? Well, now they're going to use all the funds from the American citizens. Trump is saying he's going to remove income tax. Well, you can only do that if you bring in the WEF, digital ID for everything. You want your universal income, you'll have to have a digital ID. And then you're going to have what Peter Thiel has, which is facial recognition and everything you've ever feared. And if China, and in the end, the BRICS comes along, China has the same technology, the same social credit system, and everybody's going to be put on the credits, the social credit system with that digital ID, and they're going to turn, they're going to regulate the Bitcoin, and then they'll be able to call it the CBDC. But what do they need for that? Tons of electricity. Well, it's time, I think, for Canadians to turn off the lights. Good night, everybody. And one last word for those who came in late. We do have hope. There's hope for everybody on this planet. We just need to get rid of the oligarchs, and we can devalue their money within a day. Okay? Stay vigilant and get informed. Join the CPU.ca or CanadianReferendum.ca. Become a member or a referendum. You can become a VIP member at the CPU or a referendum community member for more
Attention,
information.
Canadians.
Bye-bye.
Do you feel disconnected from our current political system? This could be our last chance to take a real legal stand for our rights. It's time to shift the political power to its rightful owners, the Canadian citizens and Indigenous peoples of Canada. Dive into our history, understand the need for change, and embark on the quest for true democracy. Are you concerned about our nation's commitment to human rights and self-governance? The power shift to freedom aligns with vital treaties and international laws enabling us to claim our rightful place as collective head of state. We advocate legally replacing the Crown, King Charles III, and our partocracy system with a true democracy, the peoples as the true collective head of state with veto power over our governance, to ensure your voice counts more than party interests. When our national collective civil and political rights are respected, your influence on policies will be direct and impactful. Join us on this noble struggle to make every Canadian and Indigenous peoples a meaningful participant in our future as collective head of state, which was legally owed and kept from us since the patriation of our Constitution, an official decolonization from the United Kingdom of 1982. It's time to correct the past of our government's lies and omissions to the people of our great country before it is too late. People 15 years old and over can sign our Canadian People's Referendum at CanadianReferendum.ca and unite for our rights as the collective head of state in our Constitution. Together, we can be the example in reshaping Canada's future, not just for us, but for all peoples worldwide, once and for all. Are you ready to be part of this transformative movement? Join the Power Shift to Freedom movement by the Canadian People's Union and be part of a bold vision for Canada's future. Visit thecpu.ca for more details. Embrace and face the change required on your part to shape our future.